Thank you all for coming for Lessons Learned from the Trenches. My name is Roberto Cavalcanti. This is my colleague, Jose Manuel. And we both come from the support organization where we learned a lot of issues from our customers. And the goal of this session today is to share that with you guys. So most of the things that you see here today are related to our experiences with issues, right? So no fluff tonight. Today we'll be talking about real problems, real issues that we hope that by listening to us, seeing what other people went through, you guys won't go through that yourselves. So let's get to it. Jose Manuel, please.
Okay. So my name is Jose Manuel Jurado. I'm a support escalation engineer based in Spain, Madrid. So I support all the relation databases that we have right now in Microsoft AdPass environment. As you could see, MySQL, Postgres, Azure SQL Database, also managed instance, etc. I have been working for Microsoft. Right now, it's my 8 years that I'm working. Previously, I support SQL Server Core. I was a DBA. Right now, I'm working with DevOps, CO, etc. A lot of acronyms that we have. I'm right now it's a speaker in different events, in SQL Saturdays, in Tech Ready, Past Summit, SQL Beats, etc. And that's it.
All right, Thank you. And as I said, my name is Roberto Cavalcanti. I'm a premier field engineer with the mission critical team. I've been working with Jose Manuel for many, many years now. I used to be.
How many years?
I think we started doing this back in 2013.
Oh, how much time, right?
That's a long time. And I've been helping customers with Azure SQL Database issues, mostly for the last 5-6 years. So as I mentioned earlier, we like to share what we see in support so you don't have to go through that again. So we'll start our agenda today by just getting some information from you guys, where you are with Azure, and then we'll talk about this nightmare in support. We'll do some role play here to try and get you to see what happens in our life as support engineers and field engineer. So we'll talk about this first call that we had at 2 a.m. on our simulation here, and then another call at 3 a.m. Focused in managed instance, then another one looking at connectivity, and let's start with our background check. So how many developers, mainly developers here? Nice. How about DBAs?
Oh my God.
Most of you. DevOps, whatever that means.
Come on, it's the most cool.
And then others?
We have others.
Okay.
What is?
Others. Others. Nice. So thank you all again for coming. Let's focus on a little bit about what PaaS and IaaS means for just a second for those who are not familiar with it.
Yeah. Do you know what is the difference between IaaS and PaaS, right? How many of you didn't know or don't know what is this? No, it's perfect. So I think that we could jump this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're fine there.
Okay.
We'll be talking, by the way, we'll be talking about PaaS. Today we'll be focusing on PaaS. We will not be talking about a SQL Server running on Azure VMs.
So the difference between SQL Azure Managed Instance, do you know what is different? How many of you don't know? Okay. So justly, let me explain some difference. You have here IaaS, it's infrastructure as a services. You know that is how it's to manage a virtual machine, okay? You install your SQL Server, you have several versions. It's very similar that you have in on-premise, okay? So right now we are talking about PaaS, platform as a services. What does mean? That is a service, okay? It's a service that you don't have the access to your virtual machine just only to have access to the environment, say about the database, etc. So you have Enterprise Edition, is SQL Server 2019 and continued evolution, and it's based on the performance. So when you want to create a new database, you are going to select or to choose what is the performance that you want, how many cores, how many CPU, how many storage that you need, okay? So this is for SQL database. Another flavor that we have is Azure Managed Instance. Between them, Azure Managed Instance is more than how to manage the entire instance. You have more access. You are able to manage all the instance, a lot of parameters that you have, okay? And you have more options that you have in SQL database. For example, you have more large compatibility. You have a network isolation, and includes a lot of things that in SQL Azure that is not possible. For example, CLR, SQL Server Agent. For example, you don't have SQL Server Agent in SQL database, okay? Right now, as you could see, we have another service, but right now we are in the middle, right? In the middle that we are changing something. For the reason we have this X. It's about at our house, but we are going to jump in this one.
Yeah, we used to support Azure SQL DW data warehouse a few years back. With the announcements you guys heard this week about Synopsys, it's foreign to us right now. In support, we didn't get any support calls, so we don't want to talk about that with you. So let's jump that. And let's focus now on this nightmare in support.
Nightmare, right?
I was supposed to be dreaming, but I had a nightmare with this customer calling me in the middle of the night.
Who is the customer?
I don't want to mention.
Okay.
So we'll look here at the first call, and I will be a support engineer, and my colleague here will be this nice customer who called us at 2 a.m.
Thanks for the word, that nice customer.
Nice customer. Of course, all customers are nice.
Okay.
So let me give you a background on what we, for privacy reasons, we're not going to share with you the details from that customer call, but let me give you a background on what the customer was telling us. So they had done no updates in their code for a long time, but they were having this unexpected issue where their business was seriously impacted with 1,000 people, 1,000 users not being able to access their system. The database was down from their perspective. And they said, we didn't change anything. They only added data for the last 8 months with no issues. Have you heard anything like this? DBAs, nothing changed? They didn't change anything either, only the data, but it's not a change. And their on-premises environment ran 20% faster. We hear that quite a lot. The comparison between how it was running before, how it's running now, that's quite common. So what happened there? How did we fix this call number 1 issue?
Hello, Roberto. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine. I'm right now in the middle of an issue that I don't know what happened. As you could see, this is my application. It's a normal C# application. I'm following all the best practice that you remember that we have many conversations previously that I didn't change anything, but I don't know what happened. Okay, because I ran this application, so let me show you.
Yeah, show me what's going on.
Yes. 1 second. I'm going to show you this one. This is the code.
Okay.
This process is very simple, you know. So I open the connection using the retry logic. I'm following the best practice in SQL database.
Okay.
And I'm running this process without any issues. And I don't know what happened right now that when I have this process, but it's running very, very, very slow.
Yeah.
So in my on-premise environment, right now it's working much better. Because in my on-premise environment, I have 32 CPU cores.
Okay.
But in SQL Azure, I have just only 2 cores. But I don't know what is the reason.
So you don't know the reason, all right? Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know what is the reason that, but before this, I promised you that this code was working perfectly, and the speed right now I don't have is very, very slow. So I don't know. Most probably it's an issue in Azure platform.
Did you change anything?
No, come on. No, I didn't. Oh.
And it's an issue with the Azure platform?
I'm sure that
Okay.
it's this. Yes.
All right, let's take a look. Let's see on your Azure desktop, let's start with your Azure portal. That helps. Yeah, it looks like you have
Yes.
some performance issues there, don't you? Let me put you on hold just a second.
Okay. Thank you.
So when you get to 100% in Azure, 100% of whatever in DTU, and I'll explain this in a little bit, you will have very slow performance. If you have worked with Azure SQL Database, you see that it's quite different from SQL Server in that sense. If you hit 100% of CPU, and if you want to take a note there, that's the most important thing, CPU, data I/O, log I/O. You cannot hit 100% on either of these. So let me go back to this call. All right, so I'm back.
Okay. What I need to do to fix the problem, please.
Okay, so let's see what of these three components that we've discussed before on the 7 calls you made me yesterday about what's going on there. Is it CPU? Is it DTU? So would you add, please, a few more metrics there? So you have DTU percentage. Let's break that down. Let's get CPU percentage there. Max, please. Instead of average. Yeah, it kind of looks like your CPU is the culprit. Let's double check how a few more metrics there. Data I/O, and then log I/O. Max as well, if you change from average to max. Thank you. And log I/O percentage, max. Yeah, it looks like if you go down just a little bit, we can look here. Okay, thank you. Yes, CPU is the issue here. Okay, let's go and move to the next step. You have a CPU problem. What's the query that's causing this?
I think that we have many connections.
You think you have many connections?
Yes.
Let's check. Add one more, please.
Yes, I'm going to click a new chart.
Sure.
Okay, so I think because I remember that we have many connections.
Yeah.
Oh,
You have how many? 1, 2.
just only 2.
Yeah, I guess you're fine there.
Okay.
So let's look at this query. Let's see what's going on. There are a few different ways we can do this. As you know, we can go to Query Performance Insight. We can look at missing indexes. So go back to your main blade and look at, yes, intelligent performance. Let's look at, we can start with automatic tuning. What do you have there? Okay, so you're inheriting from the server, and you have them turned on or off?
It's on.
They're
I
on.
follow up all the instructions that you give me in the previous calls that we have.
All right, so you have force plan, you have indexes being created. All right, how about on the performance overview? What do you have there? Interesting. So we can see that you have a few top consumers there that are much higher than the others, right?
Yes, right.
Okay. How about if we go to Query Performance Insights and take a look at what's going on? Good. So we see that there's this yellow query there that's most likely the culprit. We're looking at CPU. We won't look at data I/O or log I/O because the issues with CPU, right? We first checked that it was CPU. So go down a little bit. Let's see what query that is. So it's query 6,256. That's the ID.
Okay, you want to click here?
If you could click there, please. Oh, so we have a query there with the query text that we know what's going on.
So
Okay.
you mentioned that this query is causing this high CPU.
It's got to be this query, right? The platform is working on the back end just fine. So if you have CPU consumption, would you give me a minute? I'll put you on hold.
Okay.
The most common thing that we see in Azure when our customers have performance issues, We see a lot of this that this customer was telling us. There's something wrong with your infrastructure. My 100% is being used because you have something else running on the back end. We hear that all the time. In Azure, SQL DB, that's not going to be the case. In very rare situations, and we do check if there is any anomaly on the back end, but 99.99% of the cases that I worked on, that he worked on, it's not. It's going to be your query. So you can go directly and focus on your query, okay? Yes, question.
So if there was something on the back end, one of those rare things, it would be reflected in the DTU.
You would not see DTU being consumed. So we can, as support engineers, we can very confidently say, let's look at your queries because you probably have a query issue. And by the way, this is, the other question we get a lot when we get to this point is, what is the role of the DBA now? What does the DBA in Azure SQL DB do? Because if you're familiar with SQL DB, and we are not covering the basics here, but you won't need to do backups. You won't need to be worried about restores. It's all done by the infrastructure. So the platform. So what does the DBA do? Is the DBA role gone in Azure SQL DB? Not at all. You have to change your skills, and one of the most important skills that you need is query tuning. So query tuning is the focus of the new DBA on the cloud. There are more things, and we'll cover in more details, but I just wanted to bring that to you. Sorry for keeping you waiting. Let's take a look at the query store and see what's going on with this query. So if you go to your Management Studio, we can see what's going on. I see that you were running sysdmdb resource stats. That's pretty good. With sysdmdb resource stats, you can see the same things we looked at the portal. Our customers are pretty advanced. They use Zoomit too. So we have CPU, data.io, log write, right there. You can quickly see what's going on, even without going to the portal. Thank you. OK, so let's look at the query store. If you go to the database, the query store is turned on by default. We have a few different options that we can look at. We could look at query weight statistics. That's one of the newer reports that were added. If you double click there, let's see what we see there. OK, so we see that CPU is quite high, right, compared to other weights. So that's interesting. Let's drill down a little bit by going to, we can go directly to tracked queries. You have that query number. So if you go back to the portal and copy that number, we can plug it in right here. So the query number is 6256. Yeah, that works. Tracked queries. And let's look at what's going on with this query. So if you go to configure all the way on the right, you will see the option of changing what we are concerned about. We want to see CPU max. So if you select CPU max, please. And let's look at the time frame where you're having the issue, which is right now. So you could do custom, or you can do just the last 30 minutes. That would work. And hit OK. All right. So we see there that you have this execution plan with some interesting information there, number of executions, average CPU time. But I see on the plan itself that we have a warning. What is that warning about? So it says there, convert implicit varchar. Anyone? Give me a moment, please. Have you seen this before? Yes?
Sorry, in this moment, so I need to know what is this. So you cannot leave me in this without,
Would you hold just a few more seconds? So convert implicit was the issue that this one customer was having, but we do get a lot of those happening, as you might as well. OK, I'm back. Let's take a look at what's going on with your application, right? It's got to be something in your application that's causing this issue?
Yes, let me go again. But again, I think that the problem is the instructor or not my application, because my application worked around 8 months without problems.
Without problems?
Yes.
Okay.
Adding data, but
And how many rows were you inserting daily?
1 million for rows per day.
All right, yeah, no changes, that's okay.
Okay.
Let's take a look at what's going on there. So you have on your application in varchar. How about in your database? What do you have in that field?
Okay, give me a chance. Go to tables. Performance, it's right now, it's varchar.
Oh, okay. So let's remove that conversion by changing your application. It would be easier than changing your
Meaning
millions
that
and millions.
my problem is because I add some data, and right now I'm checking. We have a convert implicit to varchar, and the data is varchar.
Right. You shouldn't, right?
I don't think that this.
You don't think that's going to fix it?
No.
Why don't we give it a try?
Okay, but again, remember that we are in severity A, critical situation.
Yes.
My boss is calling me every hour. Okay?
Yes,
every
and
minute.
you called me at 2 a.m., yes.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the application. So you mean that I need to change this one, right?
Yes, change it to a type that will match the type that you have on your database.
Okay.
And let's see how your application behaves now.
Remember that I stopped all the production environment that we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, a bit better.
Okay, this is the expected speed. I'm sure that you did something in the
I
background.
did something in the
Yes,
background.
I totally agree with that one.
All right. Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
But I have some questions for you, Roberto. Could you
Okay.
please, because I reviewed something about, I remember that you mentioned something previously about the diagnostic settings.
Yes?
Could you please explain more about what that means?
Of course. There are different ways of looking at the issue. We could use that as one of the ways of checking it out. Why don't we check it if you have it set up? Let's take a look.
Okay.
So you came to the database and you already set up the diagnostic settings. And where are you sending this data to? Okay, so you're sending to Log Analytics?
Yes, I have right now just only log analytics, yes.
Okay,
I send all the information that you mentioned, SQL Insights,
Perfect.
tuning. You could see all the options that we have right now.
excellent. Thank you for doing that. That's going to be very helpful.
Okay.
Okay, so do you want to see how we see this information there
I
as
will
well?
like.
So
because-
let's go to this Log Analytics workspace that you created there. All right. And if you go to Workspace Summary, so you already added the Azure SQL Analytics preview option. Excellent. That is capturing the data, and it's going to give us some useful insights into your database. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so what we can see here, if you click on that database that has a CPU information there, we have lots of details about what's going on. We can see here, if you go back, all the way back to where you were, to the right. Okay, so let's start with some insights that are collected by Azure SQL Database on the back end, sent to Log Analytics, and analyzed with AI, artificial intelligence, to tell us what's going on. If you zoom it there, please, we can see that the system itself found out that there was a high CPU issue going on, and it pointed out to us and surfaced that information right there on this portal. So that would be a great way of finding out what's going on. Let's take a look at some more graphs. So we have some insights, we have some queries. Let me ask you to click on the query weights graph, please. The third one from, yes, let's see what you have there. Oh. So that's taking us to log analytics with Custo information, Custo query language. It gives us the Custo query language KQL query that you can run. And would you give me a moment, please?
Yes.
KQL is one of those things that you should learn as a DBA for Azure SQL Database if you decide to use log analytics. That is a great tool that can help you see what's going on with your database. It's easy to learn this language for those who know T-SQL. Very similar concepts. One weekend will be enough for you to get those queries that are prepared for you and to learn the syntax very easily. All of our support engineers learn KQL in 1 week, and they're already ready to troubleshoot and find out what's going on. The key here is to capture those queries that were prepared for you automatically and play with them and go from there. There are some good courses on KQL out there, and I highly recommend if you are moving to Azure and if you are going to use log analytics. You can see all kinds of information with this.
So right now we are summarizing the data every 30 minutes, right?
Right. You can change that 30 minutes to 5 minutes. That would work. Let's see how that changes the bins. Especially if you change the chart type from stacked column to timeline.
Timeline.
Yeah, that will make a big difference. You see more points, more details if you put this bin in smaller chunks of 5 minutes instead of 30. How about if you change it to 1 minute? Is it going to do any difference? It's going to change anything there?
I don't know. You are the master, so. Yep, it seems that I need to change the.
Yeah, change it
line.
to. You are rendering to bar chart instead. So that's why in your code you can say what you're going to. Would you do me a favor and where you have render bar chart, change on the code itself?
Okay.
Where it says bar chart, render bar
Yes,
chart,
bar chart.
change it to timeline.
Timeline.
Just start typing time chart. Time chart, yeah. And run it, and then it will render in time chart. So very powerful tool. We can see what's going on. Now do me a favor, go back to the analytics, Azure SQL Analytics. Go to the right a little bit. Let's look at the query itself. Let's see what it says about the queries. So if you go to the right a little bit more. Yep, that other bar.
The bar?
This one. Okay, so we didn't have any timeouts. We didn't have any blocking. We did have some errors. Let's look at those errors. So you can see more details about the server itself, the database, the error 208. Okay, some.
Very interesting information for us.
What is that?
No, it's very interesting
Yeah, it
information
will
that
give
we
you.
have because it's good for us.
It's good for you to know, yes.
Yes, right.
Now click on the database again, please. There. And now click on that second query where we see, yes. Would you give me just a moment?
Yes, I could wait for you.
As support engineers, we don't have access to your queries. We can't see what's running. Right now, we are seeing what you see, the front end. So the query hash was transformed automatically into the actual query that was running right there and consuming most of the CPU. So just so you know, you are the ones who have control over the query text itself.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I hope
you
this
fixed
helped.
my problem today.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Okay,
so much.
have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so that's how we fixed issue number 1. What did we do? What did we learn here? Let me move to this side. So we had a frequently simple issue. What I just showed you is very easy to fix. It's a common thing that many of you already know about. And that's what we see also in support. Many of our cases are simple or just common issues that you see in SQL Server. but they're becoming more and more complex. As we started supporting managed instance, for example, then the kinds of issues that we used to see, just outdated statistics, missing indexes, and throttling, which is pertinent to Azure SQL Database specifically, not so common or prevalent in SQL Server. Parameter sniffing, it's always very common, but then they're becoming more complex. And not just because of managed instance, but because now we have 80 cores available. So more complex workloads are running in Azure SQL Database. And as a DBA, when you migrate, you may go to a complex environment at that time as well. So we have query tuning as the main focus for the DBAs, query timeouts, blocking, and the same things you see in SQL Server, which we didn't see before as often. All right, so let's look at what you should do to fix those issues. Always verify, update statistics, same as you do in SQL Server, very important in Azure SQL Database. Diagnostics, like what I showed you in Log Analytics, will help you. Then investigate missing indexes, use Query Data Store, use SQL Audit to see if you have parameters that queries that are parameterized and you don't know what was running, what number was running there, what scalar. You can use Audit to see exactly what ran at that specific time. Query Performance Insights will give you information as well. Then consider reducing fragmentation, not as important in Azure SQL Database in our experience as it is in SQL Server, but we also have seen it fixing a lot of issues in Azure SQL Database. So it depends on your workload. And then finally, go to your queries and start tuning your queries. Is there enough power on your database? Do you have enough CPU, enough log I/O, data I/O, according to what's the maximum that's being hit? And finally, if you can't resolve it, call us and we'll help you.
That's right.
So, yes, sir.
So, what is the explanation for why it worked before and now it didn't?
So the question was, what's the explanation for why did it work before and why it's not working now? On the example that we gave you, they didn't change anything on their code, but the amount of data that they had running with that conversion, implicit conversion, was not enough to cause an issue. I didn't call your attention to the query plan, but there was an index scan that for a long time was running fast enough because the amount of data that they had didn't compromise the speed of the query execution. They got to a point where it's true, they didn't change anything. And that's the problem. They didn't change anything. They should have. They should have done a lot of things to prevent that, as the DBAs here can agree. And so it got to a point where it reached the maximum point of return for that plan. And then when it reused the plan, it was not ideal for that data distribution anymore.
Let me just show you an example about it. Sorry, it's 3, right? Sorry. Is that Roberto mentioned about the execution plan?
It's kind of small.
Yep, 1 second.
It's kind of big.
Yep. For example, this one. I'm going to enable the execution plan. Okay, 1 second. Yep. If I run the query, right now, as you could see, the time spent to execute the query right now, it's taking a few milliseconds. Okay, so just only it's in the SIG. As you can see here, it's very nice. So if I change right now to Unicode, if I run again,
then it's much, much slower.
what is the reason? As Roberto mentioned before, in the execution plan, they are using a cluster index scan. So they read all the index scan, all the number of rows that we have
And
here.
we have 400,000 rows in this database, which is not that large, but the database, where are you running this?
It's standard 0.
So it's an S0. An S0 has, and if you want to take a note on this one, 100 DTUs in standard and basic equals 1 vCore. So 100 equals 1 vCore. In premium, it's 125. 125 DTUs equals to 1 vCore. So S0 has 10 DTUs?
10 DTUs.
10 DTUs. So it's like a fraction of a core. And so that's why you have those kinds of behaviors on only 400,000 rows, but with this conversion and with a tiny processor, that's what you get. Okay, so the lessons learned, and by the way, we will be at the clinic from 6 to 8. If you care to make more, to ask more questions about your specific environment or from what we covered here, please meet us there at the clinic for Microsoft Clinic. We'll be answering questions there. Yes, we have one question there.
So, you getting the right GPU level is complicated, especially in a situation where, you know, maybe 80% of the time the database is sitting at 0% utilization, and then the analysts want to refresh their powerful Power BI report. They're waiting an hour, and then they let me know something's wrong. And then at that point, I'm like, well, do you want me to, you know, upgrade the database? Because it's going to take 45 minutes for that scale up to happen.
Yes. So the question was, when we have a database that's fine for most of the time, what happens when someone comes with this Power BI that's going to hammer your database and request much more data than that SKU can offer? One suggestion would be, if you can offload your reports to a GeoReplica, for example, and that GeoReplica would be at a level that would either be enough to handle that amount of requests that are coming, or you don't care if it will take longer to run that report. So with GeoReplicas, you could, for example, have an S0 as the primary, and the secondary in the same data center, if you want to, at S4, S12. If you keep in the same tier, you can have the secondary with a different capacity than the primary. So you could do that. But it kind of defeats the savings. Yeah. So it's just one possibility. Definitely. So the question was, how about serverless? Yes, serverless could help you there. Just be careful on if you're not turning it off, or if we are not turning it off for you. But let me cover that on a one-on-one if you guys allow me later on, because we have a lot of content to go through. But please come to us at the clinic at the Microsoft booth, and we will answer more questions.
Because we have more techniques about it. You could create indexed views, for example, because we have many cases using Power BI, depending on the queries, etc. We could show you several examples in order to, let's say, to try to balance between the workload and the money that you pay.
Yes.
Regarding update statistics,
Mm-hmm.
what is your recommendation of should we run it as a classic job, or is there any other way in SQL Azure database
Yes.
to get it done?
So the question was, if we have, when you are updating statistics, or I'll add to your question, rebuilding indexes or doing maintenance, what would you use? Elastic jobs, or I would suggest Azure Automation or Logic Apps. Those are two of the easiest and better ways of doing that, and you run your schedules there. Okay, so let's continue.
This is just only for SQL database. In managed instance, you have SQL Server agent.
You have the agent there, yes. So we showed you on this first example how the portal, how Query Data Store can help you. We showed you that you should review your code, definitely check for implicit conversions, teach your developers about it if they don't know the impact that has, test in advance, As your table grows, retest it. That's the point we were discussing a bit earlier. You have to see what's going on with your code, with your database. And scaling up may not be the answer. I would be paying more by going from S0 to S1 to S2 with a simple, possibly simple fix. So in some cases, you can't. You have to go through this huge process. For example, my mission-critical customers, they cannot just go and change their code right away. There's a lot of bureaucracy to get that done. So a quick fix to prevent you from losing money, yeah, go up. Go up to whatever level will support that discrepancy.
Yes.
But that's not the ideal way of
Yes,
of
in this specific case, we increase the database to P15. So you can imagine that is the maximum capacity that we have. This customer has around 7,000 million for rows, so it's amazing the number. So in the end, was not
It was
possible.
not enough.
Yes, was not enough.
Even with a P15, which is the highest that you have in the DTU model. So to save some money, invest time in diagnostics and coding. And the reason we talked about money here is because one of the most common reasons why people go to Azure SQL Database is to save on their, to save. So we showed you Azure Analytics and Intelligent Insight capabilities. There is a page on our documentation that shows you all the different types of AI that's being done on the back end, and we'll share with you in our presentation. At the end of the presentation, you see it there. Go check it out. As a DBA and as a developer, you'll be quite happy to see what the AI is doing for you to make your life easier to troubleshoot performance issues. So I have my nice customer waking me up again and calling me this time at 3 a.m., not even an hour after we fixed that initial issue. So now he's calling me with an issue with MI.
Okay. So
Hey, Jose.
how are
Thanks
you,
for
Roberto?
waking me up again.
Yes, I don't know what happened. Today is the worst day that I have in my life. I
No
have another
worries.
problem. I don't know what happened.
I'm here for you. I'm just joking. I'm here 24/7 for you. Please go ahead.
24/7, every day. Every
Yes,
hour.
sir. Microsoft is.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have this code. I don't know what happened, and sometimes I have this random issue.
Okay.
So after 5 seconds, more or less, I have this error, but I don't know how to fix the problem.
So what's this error that you have? You have a timeout expired.
Yes, execution sign now expired.
Okay.
Yes. So I
All
don't
right.
know what is the issue, but sometimes I have this issue or not.
Really?
Yes, but I don't know if it could be possible. More probably could be the platform.
Do you have your developers that could join us on the call? Or are you the developer?
I am the developer.
Oh, okay.
You know that I'm the developer, the DBA, the DevOps.
Yes. And the other.
Yes, yes, you know.
All right. So let me show you. Do you remember when you called me 7 times on Tuesday and I shared with you this code to run extended events?
I remember this one. Let me check because 1 second.
You saved it somewhere, right?
Most probably, but I don't know where. But let me check.
Okay, thank you.
Check. Yes, I have this one.
Good. Would you open it, please?
Yep. So yes, this is the code I have.
So that's the code. That's an interesting stored procedure name.
Yes, it's a Spanish. Come on.
Okay. So you did all the steps to create your
Yes.
extended events.
Yes, I followed your instructions. I create 2 extended events.
Excellent.
One, it's for when we have an error,
Okay.
capturing some data, for example, the application name, the client ID, the host name.
That's good.
And also when something happened, when we have an attention, for example, I would like to capture what is this. For example, client IP, for example, also the SQL text,
Exactly.
the user name.
Perfect. That's going to give us exactly what we were looking for. So would you please run those?
Yep, I'm going to run it. right?
And you saved it at the database level, right? Not at the server level.
Yes,
Because in
yes.
Azure SQL DB, yeah.
Yes, in SQL database, you need to use at database level, but in managed instance,
You could do it at the
yeah,
server level.
Yes,
Yes, but it did it at the database level. Okay.
Okay. Oh, we have
So
a
the
problem.
target
Yep.
found some issues. Let's fix those issues.
Yeah, 1 second. I don't know what happened. Okay, it's the same. Let me check. Configuration error during.
Cannot be added.
Access
Access is
denied.
denied.
Okay, I don't know what happened, but be sure that I don't
That's
know.
okay.
Okay.
But you captured it.
yes, previously. Yeah,
All right.
yes.
So excellent. Let's open your previous capture.
Okay. I'm going to the containers. Click here.
Okay, so give me a minute, please.
Yes, sure.
And keep going. With Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, you have to save it outside of the VM where your database is running because you don't have access to it. And blob storage is the place to go when you are using extended events. So he's now browsing where he saved the XEL file from extended events, so we can take a look at that.
Okay, I have this file. I'm going
Sure.
to open this one. This is a standard event. I'm going to click here, download. Okay.
Okay, so you downloaded it. Let's open it in Management Studio and check it out, see what's going on there, what the session captured. Okay, so we see there that it captured a query that had a timeout. That's exactly why we created this event, this extended event for. So we can see there, it's kind of small, but if you could zoom it there, we see that the query text, the batch text here, points to this interesting named stored procedure, USP timeout, and it was aborted, so there was
It's attention.
an attention, right?
Yes.
And
The client closed the connection.
the client closed the connection, that's right. And the duration was 5
Around
seconds.
5 seconds, yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at this code. What do you have in USP timeout?
I don't know what is this. Let me check because you know. I'm going to check this one. I'm going to open
So that's your managed instance, okay.
this instance. Yes, I'm going to databases. This is the stored procedural.
Okay. So let's see what's in this query text there. So we have, interesting. You have a 10 seconds delay.
But what
In
happened
your-
is that just only 10 seconds.
Okay.
What?
But it's timing out in 5 seconds.
What do you know this?
Well, I just showed you that we captured the information and it said that it aborted in 5 seconds, right?
Yes, right.
So let's take a look at your application and see what you have there. There are some controls that you have in your application. Yeah, I can see there that the command timeout is a little bit shorter than 10 seconds.
So you mean that I need to change this value?
That would be nice.
Okay.
Yes, if you change it to a bit more than 10, you would prevent an attention.
Okay.
Okay,
So thank you so much, but I have more questions for you.
sure, what's going on?
I will like, because I know that managed instance, I don't have the KPI, so I don't know what happened. I know several metrics, I know CPU, etc., but I don't know how many queries, or what is the queries that are running right now.
That are running right now?
Yes, could you please show me, because I don't know.
Sure. You have different ways of checking that. From what I showed you before, which one do you prefer?
I will like this one. For example, I don't know. So the idea is to review the queries that the time
All the queries that are running.
Yes, right now.
Okay. So profiler would be a good way?
Yes.
Okay, let's take a look at what's going on this MI that's always running these two by default, and they can show you what's going on with your T-SQL code. What's running at all times. You have that by default in MI. So please, let's take a look at that. Let's use the profiler, the X-Event profiler.
It's possible to use a profile.
X-Event profiler works in MI. The regular profiler works in MI, the old version. We don't recommend you use it, but you could. And so we can see all the queries that are running there. Is that what you wanted?
Yes, it's perfect because I have many information there.
Cool. Can I
nice.
close the case?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, yes.
So let's see what we learned from this call. And I think I didn't give you the background of what was going on. Would you change?
Yes, please. Yeah,
Thank you. And let's see here. Okay, so I didn't give you guys the background, but the issue that this customer had in real life was that they were having this timeout going on, and they wanted to know what queries were being executed. And with the random issue that you saw us using Xevents profiler to look at, it was not as easy as we showed you. It was not a 5. The number that they had there was what we generally ask as a default, but you change it for whatever. So they had it at 30 seconds. But the queries that they were running, same reason as before, as data grew, the queries started taking a bit longer to a point where they were running the minimum they could run because they were not updating statistics at that point. They were not optimizing the query. It was taking longer than what they had on their code as the timeout. So every time you have that, an inattention is going to happen. Going back to what we just saw, simple issue. We see that in SQL Server, and unfortunately, you see the same in MI and SQLDB. But it's easy to fix. We just showed you Profiler. In SSMS, you have the default reports as well that you could be looking at different information. And you have most features that are used on premises ready for you to use in MI. SQL Server Profiler works, but we don't recommend you use it unless you really need it. So at 4 a.m., we had, in the same night, we had this next call where we had some connection times issues where the customer was complaining that in their on-premises environment, they had one connection time. On their Azure environment, they had a different connection time. The business was mediumly impacted, but it was coming up in a different region of the world where it was the middle of the day for them, 4 a.m. for us, middle of the day for them. And the reason why it was a big problem is that their management reports were running slowly. I like to remind everybody that the criticality of the issue comes from how critical the user is, right? I think you all agree with me. So how did we fix that issue? Oh, or actually, let's look at the issue first. So,
the same customer.
Mr. Customer, thank you for calling me again.
Okay, thank you so
How
much
can
again,
I help
Roberto.
you?
Another time.
My
another
pleasure.
Time. So you are my hero today.
All right.
Okay, so it's okay. Okay, perfect.
So what's the issue? What's going on?
I don't know. I migrate my application by now from on-premise to Azure, but I have the feeling that the connection is not the same. The time spent to connect to the database, to run queries is not the same. We have the same CPU, the same capacity, but I have the feeling that I don't know what happened, but the connection takes more time than in on-premise.
That's interesting.
So
how can you tell the difference?
Yes, come on. This is my role right now. It's I create an amazing tool.
Okay.
Following instructions.
Nice.
Okay. So I have learned something that was very interesting for me. That every time, let me show you an example here. That when we run this parameter, every time that you run any option, any query against one specific database. Every time that I run retrieve statistics, I have some information that is very useful for me about the bytes received, bytes sent, execution time, connection time, etc. So I'm following this instruction because we have this documentation in our Microsoft documentation.
Okay.
So I would like to show you these things. I run right now this query again, okay? Just only to have 2,000 rows.
Okay.
Okay, and I would like to run, but this is the information that they receive. Second here, yep.
So that information is going to show us the difference between on-premises and when running in Azure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, for example, as you can see, we have around 18 new counters. As you can see, we have byte received is around 30,000, the byte sent, and for me it's very important about the connections and time. So the execution time, let's say the connection plus the execution was around 400 milliseconds, but the connections took around 100.
125 milliseconds to connect.
Yes. Right.
Okay, and how does it affect your application? Can you show us?
Yes, because right now I don't know what happened, so let me show you my application. One second, no, it's not the first. 1 second here.
Okay.
1 second.
So you have your application running slower than what you expected.
Yes, I have the feeling that it's taking more time.
Okay. We saw that it was taking 100 milliseconds. That's like 25% of the entire execution time. I agree, it's kind of high. And how about on-premises? How did you have that? It was much faster?
Yes, I'm sure.
And are you applying the best practices like we discussed?
Come on. Yes.
Of course, right? Okay. Can you show me?
Yes, let me show you an example here.
I believe you,
okay.
But I need to see it.
I expect that.
All right.
Okay. So this is the connection.
And you are using connection pooling?
Yes. Yes, because let me show you again.
Okay.
1 second. Yes, I have pooling submit.
Okay.
I running this time. Sorry, this time using connection pooling. Yes.
So you have this variable called pooling summit.
Yep.
That's interesting. And what's its value? Is it true?
Let me check.
Okay.
So okay. I forgot to move the variable here. No, it's false.
So it's false. So you're not using connection pooling.
Most probably yes. I'm not using the connection.
Okay. How about we start using it and see if there's any change there?
Okay. Let me. Are you sure?
Sure, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So connection pooling kind of makes a difference there, right?
So right now we have one connection right now every time we are opening a new connection. So it's fine. So
much faster.
Yes.
Good.
But I don't know what happened with the developer. Most probably the developer
the
changed
developer
something
changed
that I need to discuss with him. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I close this case?
Yes, totally.
All right. Thank you very much. So let's look at what we learned here. What were the lessons learned when we had this call with this customer? First of all, I'll let my colleague Jose Manuel explain to you how connections work, and we'll get to the lessons learned.
Yes. I don't know if you know what happened when you establish the connection with SQL Database. With SQL Database, you are connecting to the port 1433 using TCP, and the connection will be encrypted. Okay, this is the most important thing in terms of security. The next phase that we have is, we have two connections. Azure Active Directory, more or less, we could say that is Windows Azure Active Directory, and we could use SQL login. When you establish the connection, we have a special proxy server. This proxy server, we have many things that they are protecting the server. So you don't have the direct connection to your server. All the connection is going through this proxy. Okay? This proxy have the capability in order to protect the connections, check the firewall rules, to verify the connection about the denied services, and those word. Those word means that if someone tried to connect to your server many times using wrong password, wrong user, we are going to stop this connection, okay, several times. I cannot say how many times, but we are going to stop around 5–10 minutes, okay? So we are using, so remember that this is a proxy, it's not your server that replied the first connection, okay? It's very important in terms of security that this proxy has other ports open. So that means that, for example, in this proxy we use to connect from MySQL, for Postgres, etc. If you run a penetration test, remember that you could see more port than 1433. Okay, it's very important. So once we have the connection, we have two types of connections. We have outside, the connection is coming from your office. This connection will be outside. We are going to use proxy. And we have some customers that are using a VPN port forwarding. Port forwarding means that they are running a port forwarding, send some communication from one port to another machine that they have in Azure. The connection is established just only for this in this way. Another one is how the connection is established. We use our proxy server, redirect the connection to the port 1433, and reach the real servers that you have in your database. So this is the connection that you have open using outside from your office. Other type of connection that we have is inside, when the connection is established in Azure environment. So we have several information. We have, or we could use public endpoint or VPNs connections. When we establish the connection, we are going to open a new connection that is called redirection. The first connection is always against the proxy. But after this connection, we are going to open a new connection using this port, 11,000, that is, the connection will be established directly to the tenant ring, to the server that you have your server, okay? So remember for the developers that you are going to open two connections. First, against the one port 33, another one will be one of the port of this range, okay? It's very important. So for this reason, it's very important to know that all these mechanisms to protect the data, but will take some milliseconds in order to establish the connection. For the reason is, more or less is a different when you are comparing on-premise or when you are comparing the connection with Azure. Okay? So other best practice, when we have a connection issues, we have 4 different best practice groups. First is the configuration. We are going to show you what is the main points in order to review what is the best practice in terms of connection. Other things is prevention. It's very important about the retry logic. Okay? The retry logic means that suppose that we are doing something in the platform. We are going to run a failover process. We are going to update your server, etc. That means that for a couple of seconds, you are not going to connect to your server. So for this reason, the retry logic means to retry the connection needs to be implemented every day in your code. Okay? Also, it's about the connection string parameters. I'm going to show you several examples. Finally, it's about the execution plan, about how it's, as we showed previously, about the command timeout. It's very important to establish the command timeout correctly in your code, depending on the query that you are running, you're using Power BI, etc. And finally, it's to monitor the connections. Okay? So this is the examples. This is the examples. I'm not going to review all of them, but this is the best practice or experience working on support engineers about the best practice about. For example, as you could see, we have connection pooling. Other things, it's about, I don't know if you know what that means, multiple marks, multiple active result sets, because it's when you are using this, you have multiple ports. Every connection, you have more 2 or 3 ports connecting to the SQL instance. Other things that is very important, open and close the connection, because in SQL Azure, when we have idle connection, we are going to close this idle connection after 13 minutes, okay? So we have many, so we could discuss later about it, but all these things is based on experience about configuration, prevention, execution, and monitoring. Other thing that is very important about select start, you know what happened, right? We have many cases that our customers say, okay, I have 10 rows or 1,000 rows, but every time that I run select start take 1-2 hours. Remember that when you run this, depending on the number of columns that you have, the data that you have, the data types that you have, you could return a lot of data about it, okay?
So these are points that we'll be glad to talk with you in details. Please take a picture of this one or get it from our slide later, and we can discuss each one of them if it interests you after the presentation over there at the clinic. What did we learn about the connectivity issue? So follow the best practices. Jose Manuel talked about retry logic. It's essential. Anyone using in production Azure SQL Database? And you've heard about retry logic from us big time, right? And you had issues without it, or you did? Okay. It is super important. Not all applications are ready to go to Azure. We'd love you to move everything to Azure, but be cautious on what you have now, especially due to those connectivity differences, where you have to prepare and you have to be ready to move. Especially with legacy applications where you didn't care about a server failing over all of a sudden, and here you will see that. So you can add your own monitoring code. There is a link there to Jose Manuel's GitHub where you have ways to share that with your developers, and you monitor what's going on with your connectivity. We do have a bonus for you, which is a few more lessons learned that we wanted to share on Azure SQL Database. So hyperscale and geo restore process.
Do you know what is hyperscale? Yep. Okay.
You've heard of it?
So it's when you need to use more than 100 terabyte of data.
100 terabytes.
So it's very important. We have in our public documentation about when you want to restore the data. Okay, when you want to restore the data, create a new database from the backup, the restore process will take a few minutes.
Even if it's a huge database, like we have a video on YouTube of a 50 terabytes database being restored in 7 minutes.
What happened?
That's pretty impressive.
Yes. What happens if you want to restore the data in another data center? If you need to restore the data in another data center, that means that we need to copy the files from one place to another place. Okay. So in this case, this time will be different.
So that's the lesson learned. It is super fast, but if you are in different data centers, it may not be as fast because you have the latency there. Yeah. So we had some read scale suggestions for you. Read scale out, one of the features of Azure SQL Database.
Do you know what is this read scale? No?
It's a somewhat new feature. We had it from last year, I think.
Most probably, yes. Most probably. Read scale is the following. If you, in the connection string, you add application intent equal read only, you are going to connect to the secondary replicas that we have from your database. Okay, that's all apply for the premium databases. Premium and business critical.
Yes.
Okay, so that means that you don't need to create a geo replication. So if you want the geo replication, you have two approaches. One is when you want to have another copy of your data to use, okay, and when you want to read the data, okay, just only read the data. If you create a geo replication, you could read all this information, but you need to pay for the geo replication. You need to pay for another database. Okay? If you use rate scale and you use application intent equals read only, that means that the connection will be established one of the replicas that you have, the secondary replicas that you have. Okay?
Right, and you don't have to pay extra for that because it's already built in. We always have an always-on availability group running on the back end where you have your primary and two secondary databases that are now available for you. It hasn't been forever. We have had this technology for a long time, but we never allowed you to access the secondary databases, and now we do. Elastic database pools, we have some issues with scaling up and down that we wanted to make it, we wanted to share with you. Anyone here with Elastic pools? Okay, so one of the major issues with Elastic pools that we've seen is, you know what happens to SQL Server when it goes down, when you turn it off for whatever reason. The buffer pool is gone, right? So in Elastic pools, we are basically sharing an instance, just like SQL Server, with multiple databases. But there is a warm-up time for the buffer pool to get, sorry, not the buffer pool, the query,
Query cache.
how do we call the query cache? The proc cache, thank you. It will take some time to warm up, right? And that is where we've seen some performance issues that we wanted to make you aware of. So we're going to talk about serverless a little bit. Go ahead, Jose.
Yes, and the storage throughput. In serverless, it's based on general purpose. Okay, we found several customers that using serverless that they are using the premium database. They have premium database is running well without problems, and they want to save money. They move the data from premium to serverless.
From premium or business critical.
Yes,
right?
Yes, premium business critical to the serverless. Yes. What happened in this point? We saw that in the storage usage, we saw that they rise 100% all the time. What happened in this point? Serverless is based on a standard general purpose. That means that the latency of the disks and the IOPS will be more or less the standard storage.
Right. Standard storage has 500 IOPS.
505 milliseconds.
Per core.
Yeah.
And 5 milliseconds latency.
Yep.
Versus
premium that you have 1 or 2 milliseconds.
In 5,000 IOPS per vCore. So it's a big difference. It's 10 times faster almost.
So in this case, the most important thing is to review what happened, okay, in terms of when you are migrating the data. Okay, we are going to have much probably our product team will work to move or to have the option in serverless to use business critical right now, but we don't know.
And finally, the last lesson learned that we wanted to share with you is about the other product that we support besides Azure SQL Database, MySQL, MariaDB,
Yes.
Postgres.
So when we have customers using Maria, SQL, MySQL, process database, they ask about, okay, the same troubleshooting process that you show us previously is the same with these databases? The answer is yes.
Yes, you use the same techniques that we used here, minus what's not available on the portal yet.
Yep.
Some T-SQL that's not there because they used a different language, but most of the techniques are the same.
Okay.
We left a few minutes for questions, but again, we'll be there at the clinic waiting for you if you have any specific ones. Any questions? Yes?
In the query store, what is the last privilege you can grant to some application user for them to kind of look at the query store without giving them full data?
Okay, so the question was, what's the minimum access level that the query store user needs to access it? Do you know the specific
I think that
one?
we have a documentation about it. One of the properties view several states, but I don't know exactly. But I think that we have documentation about
Well,
it.
we do have it documented. We can show you.
If not, we could show you after in this. Okay.
All right, I see. Any more questions?
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.